So next up we have Ed Ferrari. Come on up, Ed. So Ed has been using Modo about 3 years now, right?
That's about right, yep.
About 3 years. Ed is just kind of an amazing individual. He's not necessarily a professional 3D artist. He's
right.
actually an actor, a stand-in of all things. So he's not standing in tonight. He's actually representing a true artist and a freelancer aspect of things. Ed was just a great contributor to the community. He really latched on to MeshFusion when it came on early, dug in there, and then when we revamped kind of the UI for MeshFusion in 10.2, he was one of the first kind of on board to get in there and dig deep and really understand it. So Ed has an enormous library of MeshFusion training tutorials and other short clips and stuff on Pixel Fondue. And I really wanted to bring him up here to kind of just speak towards how it just has fun with Modo in general, and just does lots of fun things with Modo. So yeah, Ed's going to give you a short demo on some of the things that he likes to do with MeshFusion and procedural modeling. So take it over, Ed.
Cool. Thanks, Shane. Yeah, absolutely. As Shane mentioned, my name is Ed Ferrari. I'm a freelance 3D artist, and I'm also a contributor over at Pixel Fondue. And I'm also just a Modo enthusiast. So today I'm going to demonstrate a technique that I use for designing ornate objects with MeshFusion and procedural mesh operations. And I'm going to design this ring here. So I have a scene open in Modo, and there's a few mesh items you'll notice, and they're all very simple, basic, almost primitive shapes. So here we have a cylinder. I have a pair of blocks with one edge on each, sort of rounded. Then I have that tall block, and we're going to use those to create this ring. And then I'm also going to cover how to create the face of the ring and get this ornate pattern. So the first thing I'll do is select the topmost mesh item, and I'm going to come over to the Fusion vertical tab and create a new mesh item, or new Fusion item, and I'm going to name it fuse_ring. And you'll notice that we have a Fusion item here, which is highlighted in white, and we also have this Fusion source, which has a green wireframe. Now, just as a refresher for MeshFusion, the green wireframe is a primary or additive operation, whereas the magenta wireframe and purple wireframe are trim operations. The magenta will subtract, and the purple will be an intersect operation. And seeing this in action will speak volumes. So I'm just reactivating the Fusion item. I'm turning on deferred update, and I'm changing the mesh mode to airtight final. And then I'm just going to take the cylinder, I'm going to left click on it and drag it onto the primary. And that will bring up this palette, and I'm just going to choose Fusion, apply subtraction. And there you can see the cylinder is now being subtracted from the primary. And you'll also notice that the wireframe of the cylinder is magenta. So everything is nice and color-coded. And now I can just adjust the subtractive element. And you'll notice that the Fusion is only updating when I mouse up from the Move tool. And that's because deferred updates are activated. So I'm also subtracting this pair of cubes, so they also get the magenta wireframe. And now this tall block is going to be a let's see, this is going to be a mesh operation. It's going to be a trim as well. So I'm just going to go to the add operator in the mesh operation stack, and I'm going to add a vortex effector because I want this tall block to be flared towards the bottom. So I've selected the vortex effector, and now I'm just going to move and scale and rotate it so that it roughly fits the size of the tall block. And again, what I'm going to do here is just get it to flare. So with the vortex effector selected, I'm going to go to the properties, and I'm going to select taper per unit, and then I'm just going to adjust the taper so that it flares. And then I'll left mouse button, click and drag on the block, and drag it onto the primary, which is the green wireframe. And I'm going to choose Fusion, Apply, Intersect. And then I'm going to press Control F to bring up the Fusion pie menu, and I just selected Disable the Fusion sources, so that we can get rid of those wireframes. Now, the one thing I don't like about this is the top is very flat. So I'm going to come over to the Cubic Geometry preset browser and choose a sphere. Now, the cubics are all quad, all Catmull-Clark subdivision surfaces that are tailor-made for working with MeshFusion. I'm just going to come into the shader tree and delete the material group that comes with it, just to keep everything nice and tidy. And then I'm going to select all the polygons from the sphere, scale it all the way up, and then just move it down. And since this is going to be an intersect fusion operation, everything within the sphere will be maintained, and everything on the outside of the sphere will be trimmed away. So when I left mouse button click and drag on the sphere and drop it onto the primary and choose Fusion Apply Intersect, you'll see that the top is now slightly rounded instead of being so flat. So another great thing about MeshFusion, and this really differentiates MeshFusion from regular Boolean operations, is the idea of strip items. So strip items are kind of they're created with the Fusion item, and they occur wherever a Fusion source item intersects with another Fusion source. So by clicking on a strip, we get this Fusion strips menu, and then in the properties, I can change the strip width and strip profile. And it's almost like working with live bevels. So you can I'm changing the strip width right now to 25 millimeters. And this ring isn't built to scale. What I usually like to do is work at the default scale, and then at the very end, I'll just use Modo's absolute scale tools to scale everything down. So now I'm going to select all of the strips that kind of meet at a corner point. And you'll see the corner right here. And then I'm going to go into the Fusion Strips menu right here, and I'm going to twirl down this strips corner. So I have this row of icons. The leftmost one is a square, and the rightmost one is a circle, and then in between is a gradation between square and circle. By choosing the circular icon, you can see the corner becomes very rounded. By choosing the leftmost square, it's very angular. And then I'm going to choose the third from the left because that's like a happy medium. And with that, the body of the ring is done. So now we're going to work on the actual design. So here's the ornate design. What I'd like to do is create these patterns. Now, the colors are not arbitrary. I'm actually thinking about MeshFusion as I design. So the green represents the positive aspect, and then the magenta is the part that will be trimmed away. So I'm going to open up a scene that's available to all Modo users who have access to the 10 series, and it's called the B-Spline template scene. So I go to Help, Kit Help, pFusion Toolkit Help and Files, and then open pFusion Template Scenes folder. And I'm going to click on the B-Spline template scene. Then I'm just going to go into the front view. I'm going to deactivate this circular curve, create a couple of empty mesh items, and then by clicking on this little rectangle right here, it brings up this form called the B-Spline edit form. And these are full of really great scripts that were written by Darrell Anderson. He's the co-author of MeshFusion. And these are just really great for working with B-Splines. So I'm also going to create a backdrop item. And then in the backdrop item properties, I'm going to go to Image, Add Clip, and then I'm going to load the image, the square knot 001. Now it comes in very large, so I'm going to go to use uniform size, and then I'm going to increase the transparency to 50%. Now, in one of the empty mesh items, I'm just going to trace out these magenta shapes with the B-Spline tool. So the B-Spline tool is new to Modo 10, and it's really great. I'm not trying to be too precise here, and then by right-clicking on the first point, it closes the curve. Now I'm just selecting all of the vertices that I want to be sharper or corners, and I'm going to choose the 3-point corner script. And then by choosing 3 of those vertices, I can choose the round corner more script, and it just rounds them a little bit more so they're not as harsh. So now it looks like I have a lot more tracing to do, but these curves work with the procedural system. So I'm in the Mesh Operations tab right now, and then I'm going to add a radial array in the procedural stack, and then I'm going to expose the radial array tool pipe and get to the helix generator properties, so I can change the axis to Z and the count to 12. And now you'll notice that it just created 11 more of those lightning bolt shapes. So now I've skipped ahead a little bit. This is probably like 25 or 20 minutes further down the line, and I have the entire design complete. And I'm just going to show you 2 ways that you can save this. If I right-click on the mesh item and go to Presets, Save, that's one way. I can also go into the B-Spline edit form, and at the very bottom I can choose Prep and Save Preset. And the advantage to doing it this way is it actually creates a nice thumbnail. It just renders a 512 by 512 image that you can use as a thumbnail for your preset browser. So to put this in your preset browser, you just go to System, Open Content Folder, navigate to the folder where you want your presets to exist, and then you open up your documents where you saved that preset and just drag that recently saved preset into your preset browser folder. Okay, so now I'm going to assign that design that we just created to the ring. So I need a few different things. I'm definitely going to need a 1 meter sweep curve, which is right here. And I'm also going to need a few designs. So the 1 meter sweep curve is just a B-spline path that's straight in the y-axis. I'm also going to bring in the square knot right here, which is what we just created. And then I'm also going to bring in the square Aztec 002 and square swirl 007 designs. So I'll also just keep my scene tidy by deleting the material groups. And then I'm going to take the 1 meter sweep curve and just move that in the Y so that it's just penetrating the top of the ring. I don't want it to go all the way through the band of the ring. And then I'm going to take all of my top designs and snap them to the very top of the sweep path. And then I'm also going to group these designs. So I'll call it GRP for group underscore top underscore patterns. I'm also going to create another mesh item, and this is going to be called MRG underscore top underscore patterns. Now, this is going to be a merge meshes mesh operation. The merge meshes mesh operation is one of the coolest things in the Modo 10 series. So I'm going to add an operator, and I'll choose merge meshes. And by exposing the sources of the merge meshes, I can add a source. Now, I'm going to use the square knot 001 pattern. And then on top of the merge meshes mesh operation, I'm going to create a curve extrude. And it's going to ask me for a path. And I'm going to use the 1 meter sweep curve. And I'll see what happens is the pattern is swept along that path. And I'm just going to activate curve cage so that the sweep geometry isn't so dense. And then I'm going to deactivate the cap start and cap end. Now you'll see why I'm using a merge meshes mesh operation in a few minutes, and it's going to be pretty cool. So you might be thinking, why don't I just drag the sweep geometry onto the primary so that it subtracts? And I could do that, but I'm not going to. And the reason is because if I do that, there's going to be a hole trimmed in the bottom, and I want to keep the band of the ring a solid piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new fusion item, and I'm going to take advantage of something in Modo 10.2 called the compound trim feature. And it really supercharges MeshFusion. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a new fusion item based off this sweep geometry. And the compound trim feature basically allows us to subtract one whole fusion item from another fusion item. So I'm going to need to trim the bottom of this sweep geometry. So I'm going to use the sphere, which we previously used to round the top of the ring. And I'm just going to reuse it to trim away at this sweep geometry. But first, I'm just going to use a push influence to kind of scale down the sphere. And I'm just using a distance of negative 75 millimeters. And now that it's the size that I want, I'll left mouse button click and drag it onto the sweep geometry and apply subtraction. And by clearing the fusion source items, you can see that it caps the bottom, but it actually inherited some of that roundness from the sphere. Okay, so here's the fun part. I'm going to select either of the fusion sources for the second fusion item, and I'm going to create a compound trim. So in the Fusion Vertical tab, under Compound Trim, I'll choose the first icon, and you'll notice a few things have happened. We no longer have the second fusion item in the item list. Instead, it's replaced with a locator. And the fusion sources from the second fusion item are children of that. And the locator looks more like a bounding box that surrounds the fusion sources. So now with the primary item visible from the first fusion item, I'm going to left mouse button click on the locator and then shift select the primary. And then I'm just going to go under Set Mesh Roll and Apply and choose the first icon, which is subtract. So now you'll see that the design, that intricate design, has been kind of cut into the ring, but it's not going all the way through. Now what's really cool about this is that because we used the merge meshes mesh operation, I can return to that mesh operation, and then in the mesh ops procedural stack, I can expose the source, and this is really cool. I can use that little button, that little black circle with the two arrows to switch the source. So now I'm going to switch to the Aztec design, and every mesh operation that's subsequent to the merge meshes operation actually propagates down the line. So it's taking into consideration the curve extrude, the compound trim, and the subtraction from the first fusion item. So all that work that we did to set up, we can now just take any old design. Even if I make a design later on tonight, I can import it as the source, and now I could just change the design on the fly. It's a super powerful part of Modo 10. So I'm just putting it back to the square knot right here. And here I've gone a little bit further, and I've added designs to the side of the ring. And it's the same technique where I have a B-spline pattern that's being swept along a path. In this case, I'm using a mirror mesh operation, so it's on both sides. And then that whole setup is part of a compound trim that's being subtracted from the fusion item, the original fusion item. So now I'm just showing you a different way to change out the sources. I have the schematic open here. And then this area right here, I have all of my different patterns. At the moment, I have this alien symbol, which is this kind of Y shape with the 3 circles. And that's being fed into the merge meshes. If I want to change it to the flower symbol, like let's say a client doesn't like alien symbols for whatever reason, and they'd rather have a flower symbol, I can just detach or delink the alien symbol from the merge meshes sources, and then just relink the flower symbol, and you'll see that it kind of pops in there. You'll also notice that I have a kind of hollow area right underneath the design. I'm just going to fill that with another geometry that's going to have its own material, just to give some material variation to the ring. But in much the same way I switched out the sources for the side of the rings, I can change the top pattern as well. So here we have the square Aztec 002 design. I'm just going to unlink the square knot and then relink the square Aztec. And straight away, the design has changed. You can literally have as many designs as you can think of, and it'll just change on the fly. It's pretty great. It's a really, really powerful aspect of Modo. It's why I love Modo. So let's say we're happy with this design, and we don't want it to be live anymore. We just want to output actual geometry. So I'm in the Fusion properties, and at the very bottom here, we have dupe and convert to mesh. I'm going to click that and give this mesh a name. I'll just call it ring_A. And now we have actual polygons that we can work with. So here I'm just going to quickly light and rig this. And I'm just going to be pretty experimental because I'm not a lighter or a rigger. But I have the flipped normals lighting scene open. And I'm just in the preset materials for that ship with Modo. I'm just dragging on a platinum material on the body of the ring, and then I'm going to use this velocity yellow car paint for the inside of the ring. It's not something I think you would typically do, but it's just the type of experimentation that I like to do with Modo. It really just opens things up. And I'm going to use the progressive renderer, and this is sped up pretty significantly. But this is the type of thing that I'll do and just go walk my dogs or go make a sandwich and come back and maybe something will look great, because with Modo it's really easy to experiment. So here I have some earrings using the same exact technique that I just showed you guys. There's a different view, and then I have some rings where I've changed the interior. Here's like the LED preset. So yeah, that's the technique. MeshFusion is incredibly powerful. Modo 10 was a huge release. So many great things. I want to thank you guys for letting me share that with you. And check out Pixel Fondue.
Thanks, Ed. I really like how you're able to take a base setup, that probably took a few hours time to generate the original ring or so.
Not really. I mean, that was almost real time. I mean, it wasn't 2 hours.
That's fantastic. And then you get instant results with the variations, with those different 2D templates and a mixture of 2D design to 3D design with instant results.
Absolutely. And I can even go back to that tonight and just change it some more.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Good stuff. All right, so up next.